I take it you're still in your still displaced. Construction still going on at your house.
Yep, yep. So we passed inspections,
That's
and
good.
well, just that's just one set. That's just the base plumbing.
Ah,
They've put all the kind of dirt back in the channel, and they're prepping now to pour everything back in, pour the concrete, and they're also whoa, started raining pretty hard here. That's crazy.
oh.
Um, and we started the new plumbing for the laundry room and the half bath. So, and then they start building out that room on Friday. So we'll see.
How many more weeks do they anticipate?
Uh, when they're done.
Yeah. What was the original estimate for time?
They said 3 months,
Okay.
and we're probably in second. We've done two already, so
Yeah.
yeah. What we originally thought we were going to do, we couldn't get it done because of physics and stuff.
Mm,
So we had to change stuff around, and then that was a delay to see how much that would cost and that kind of stuff. So I mean, the delays were, I mean, they weren't anyone's fault. I mean, it's just kind of the way we originally thought things would work, couldn't work.
yeah.
So we had to rejigger stuff. So that was probably a 2 week delay, and then, all the stupid uh, the permits and all that other garbage just takes time, and it's downtime. It's not like nobody's doing anything.
Right. Right. Man. How has it been working out living with your parents? I mean, you have four extra people in their
It's about
house.
as it's about as well as I can hope.
Yeah, okay. And they
I
have the
mean,
space, the extra rooms for you guys?
yeah, I mean, I can't. There's nothing that I have complaints about. I mean,
Okay.
in the end, it's not ideal, and everyone's just trying to
Yeah,
make the best of it.
right. Yeah, I think if it happened to us and I had to move in with my parents, it would be a problem because the kids have behavioral issues at home, which is normal, totally normal. But they would show that side eventually if living in someone else's house. And I think my mom would be like, "Nope, can't live here anymore."
Yeah. Yep.
All right, one more minute to start. We only have one question. Well, we do have a question about statistics parser. Go ahead, Richie. When are
Someone
you
asked
going
me,
to add ads?
and when am I going to add ads? Never. Um, no point. It doesn't get a lot of traction, so it's not going to give me a lot of money anyway. So why bother?
A quarter a month.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. I mean, maybe I could actually put some work into it at some point. But someone last week found a bug in it or something, and
Oh.
I'm like, I don't even want to look at that code because that was written on a plane. The core of it was written on a plane, and in one of Brent's first training session with Brent Ozar Unlimited.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, there's a whole bunch of garbage probably in there that I don't ever want to see ever again. There was code that I wrote 2 months ago that I was reading
Yeah.
yesterday. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know we did it. Why did I do it this way? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So
We get
happens.
smarter as time goes on. All right, let's get started. Andrew has a question. I actually saw this question in the help account too. Not sure if it got answered or not, or if we directed you to Stack Exchange or yeah, Stack Exchange. It's a little lengthy, but yeah, since we don't have that many questions, I'll go ahead and say the question and answer it. So it's asking about database corruption, check DB versus suspect pages. So the suspect pages table is in the MSDB database, and if there's a row in there, it indicates you've had past corruption. He's saying that he ran CheckDB against that database where the suspect pages row is showing that there's corruption. CheckDB is good, and there was a row for TempDB as well, but that value was from year 2015, and TempDB gets recreated every time we restart SQL Server. So to answer your question, the database corruption existed at some point. Maybe the restarts of TimeDB has resolved it. If you haven't moved hardware in the past 3 years, chances are the database corruption issue, whatever the root cause was, may still exist, depending upon how out of date your IO subsystem drivers, firmware, all those types of things are. But if you had any rows in the suspect pages table, you had database corruption. Maybe it doesn't exist now, but if you haven't fixed the root cause of it, it can come back. So it's something you want to take a look at. Make sure you run CheckDB against all databases. Do the full check. Don't just do physical only. I know some people only run physical only, but once you have a row in the suspect pages table, I think it's prudent to go ahead and run CheckDB, the full CheckDB against all of them, and see how out of date you are for patches. SQL Server can cause database corruption, so are you on the latest service pack and hotfix? Remembering that going forward, Microsoft is moving away from service packs, so you got to apply cumulative update packages. And then the other side of the database corruption is usually somewhere in the IO subsystem. It's not necessarily a disk is bad. It can be, but it could be just out of date drivers, firmware, BIOS, all that type of stuff. So make sure all that stuff gets up to date fairly frequently. Once every couple years is not enough. All right, what else do we have? I hate the scrolling in GoToWebinar. For me, it's always backwards. I don't know if it's it's backwards for you too. Probably for Brent on a Mac, it's probably the correct way. So I'm always scrolling down through the questions. It's like wrong way. All right, question from Christopher. This is probably going to be a Richie one to answer. So developers have created a lot of code that calls external CLRs, and we're seeing memory pressure events, and those CLRs get unloaded and then reloaded. Aside from an extended event profile where I just line up the times where the CLRs are unloaded and reloaded and just try to line up the poor memory hogging queries, is there any way to see memory usage by CLR? I thought it was going to be a Richie question, but I don't think it is.
No. I mean, I like the concept of the CLR. It's just, I think the hard part about CLR is, in SQL Server, is knowing when to use it and when not to use it. And sometimes us developers, all we know is, oh, I could put .NET code inside of SQL servers. Yeah, I could do that. That sounds like a great idea. I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's really not a good idea.
Yeah, I get stuck on some clients. We'll see CLR wait stats come up, and it used to be that we would ignore those wait stats because SQL Server is using CLR stuff, and so there could be a lot of waiting time on that stuff. It's ignorable. But there was a client who had a CLR issue. Redgate Software was pointing it out, and we didn't see this issue because it was on our ignore list. So we had to take it off the ignore list. And now I see it all the time as being, one of the top 3 weights on the system. And I always have to ask, are you using any CLR? And unfortunately, a lot of clients are like, oh, I'm not sure. How do you not know?
Yeah.
So usually it's SQL Server stuff, but troubleshooting it is challenging. I mean, it's not running. You're not going to see the stuff that it's running. I mean, unless it's running store procedures. This is all external stuff that it's doing. So I don't really have an answer to this question. Except maybe you need more memory.
And in case you didn't know, SQL Server does use the CLR. You can't turn it off. It's just going to happen. If you take a look at like a lot of the new stuff they put in T-SQL in 2012, that is mostly CLR stuff. I mean, I can take you right back to the .NET function that, oh yeah, that's exactly what that is, and that's how it's using it. And my cat's trying to crawl on my keyboard, and that's not a good thing. Down.
All right. Oh, and then that Redgate software, the version that they were using, I'm almost positive it was the free version. So Christopher, maybe try out the Redgate free monitoring tool and see if it points to an issue with CLR. It might give you some more detail. I'm almost positive it was the free version of the software.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other question is that if this is a problem, if memory's a problem, then why not just throw more memory at it, right? I mean, you may be spending a lot of time, hence your money, because they're paying you for your time, and why not put that towards more memory towards the box? Just food for thought.
Yeah. And the two ways that I look at memory as far as T-SQL goes, which may not apply to the CLR depending upon what the CLR is doing, I'm looking at SB Blitz cache reads, average reads, and then the memory grant sort orders. And so reads and average reads will take a look at the what's using a lot of data pages, so the buffer pool, and then memory grant is the query workspace area in RAM. So is there anything that's getting a large memory grant that maybe it's clearing out a lot of space in RAM, and now the CLR has come under pressure and it's being unloaded. So I would look there, look at Blitz cache and reads, average reads, and memory grant sort orders. All right, Steve asks, we are in the process of having an argument or discussion about the relative merits of Hackathon and SSD. Care to chime in? I don't know that we're the right people to talk about Hackathon. I mean, we're generally against Hackathon's in-memory OLTP, right? I always forget what the acronyms are later because after the product gets released, we don't use that term anymore. We start using the real
name.
term. Yeah. So Hackathon's in-memory OLTP. SSD, love SSDs. Love it, especially for TempDB, but I'm not sure what the discussion about Hackathon and SSD, what that correlation is.
Yeah, I played with Hackathon when it was still in beta. And there were a lot of issues back then that still are in the back of my mind, and I don't even know if they're issues anymore. So, like once you create a table on it, using in-memory, it was really difficult to take it off, or if you couldn't take it off at all, and you had to drop the table, and there was a lot of other, kind of wonky stuff. You couldn't put like some constraints on it and things like that, and it was like, this isn't. It's not what you think it is, right? So if you're thinking of, hey, I just want my normal OLTP database, and maybe this one table will go faster if it's in memory, it probably is not going to do what you think it's going to do, right? So good fast SSDs are always phenomenal.
All right, Lee has a question. I inherited a SQL Server and it has a DBCC job that is a maintenance plan. It is failing, but if I run the DBCC command in SSMS and loop through all the databases, it works fine. I've recreated the job, but it still fails. Lee, this is the reason why I don't use maintenance plans ever. I haven't used maintenance plans since SQL Server 2000, and I only used it back then because that's what log shipping used. Maintenance plans are hard to troubleshoot. Some people know how to troubleshoot them better and say that they're okay as long as you know how to troubleshoot, but I'm just like, why do I have to learn this other thing when I can just use custom code to do the same task? So if you've inherited the SQL Server and you're the one that's going to be maintaining it going forward, put your job in place instead. Get rid of the maintenance job, and maybe it's not even doing the tasks that you want it to be doing, but if it's DBCC, it's probably doing a check DB, and I would be using Ola Hallengren's integrity checks store procedure instead. I would not be using maintenance plans at all. All right, Nika, long story. We need to add primary keys to thousands of heap tables and 30+ databases. Whoa. What major issues may come up if we just add an identity column? How can I know which tables may need to be rebuilt? Well, if you're adding an identity column, it needs to be rebuilt. So you can't just add it. So that is going to be a fairly big task. Make sure you have a fairly large maintenance window for this, and maybe tackle one database at a time, maybe a set of tables at a time. And if these have a lot of reads versus writes, besides just adding a primary key, make sure it's clustered. So heap table is a table without a clustered index, and if you have a lot of reads as compared to writes, it probably should be a clustered index table. If a lot of writes as compared to reads, or if write performance is way more important than reads, keep it a heap. So primary key non-clustered. But make sure you make that decision per table. If this is an OLTP system, generally all tables will be clustered indexes unless they're staging tables.
Yeah, I think the other thing that you need to look for is data quality. So when you're adding primary keys, most likely you don't have unique indexes on there either, so you'll probably have duplicate data in there at some point. Finding that is crazy, and it takes time, and a lot of times you're trying to go through all these rows. You're like, okay, well, which one's the real row and which one's connected to other tables and all this other stuff. But once you put the primary keys on, that's an exercise that you probably should step through, either during or as you once you've already done all that work, because guaranteed, if you don't have unique indexes on there, you will have duplicate data. It just happens.
Yeah. All right. Jason asked, do you guys have anything against distributed transactions? The only thing that I have against it is if it ever leaves an orphan transaction out there. So as long as it's cleaning up the work when a rollback happens and it's committing transactions as fast as possible, I don't have any issues with it. As far as a DBA, I always was annoyed when the Java developers would want me to set up the XA transactions, the XA distributed transactions thing. It was the manual stuff. I think I read in newer versions, maybe it's 2017 or the new version 2019 that automatically has that set up now, since a lot of people are using it. So I was always just, I was always an annoyed DBA, so having to do this extra work. It was not to, it was an easy task, but it was just very time consuming across multiple servers I would have to do it on. So just making sure that rollbacks occur, no orphan transactions, and that transactions are committed as fast as possible. Do you have anything on that topic, Richie?
Nope. Thank goodness never needed to use it.
Yeah, it sure complicates the system.
Yep.
Involving other pieces.
I think it's one of those things that as you're architecting it, you always go say, okay, do you need this? And you try to do everything possible not to do that, right? And that was actually one of those things, like distributed transactions. Like, I don't know, I don't want to do that, right? I mean, that makes things a lot more complicated. And as architects, you're trying to make things simpler, not more complex, even though that's where we tend to go because we like to draw lines and boxes on whiteboards. I mean, that's our profession. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I never wanted to put into, and it's always like, okay, if we really need to, then we'll do it. But there's a lot of pain involved there, and I'm not for one to run towards pain at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and ask yourself, does it really need to be synchronous as part of the, or can it be asynchronous so it's not in a transaction?
Yeah, even banking systems, they're not synchronous. You would think that, oh yeah, they need to be. Nope.
No. All right, Sean asks, is there any way to tell how recently a procedure has been executed? I can't think of anything that where the system is storing this. So if you need to know this information, modify the store procedure to write this information.
Yeah.
You could set up a job to write current activity to a table, but such as every minute, let's say. But that's only going to catch the stuff that are running at that moment in time. And if the store procedure is extremely fast, you may never catch it when that job runs. All right. And Lee follows up with this maintenance plans question that management wants to use maintenance plans for some reason and cannot change it. I just would not be at that job if that were the case. If I were forced to use maintenance plans, I literally would not work there anymore. This is a showstopper for me. If I'm the one in control of the SQL Server, I'm going to be making the decisions for how it's going to be, how the jobs are set up. Maybe I won't have control of. Maybe I won't have control over the domain and the operating system version. A lot of times I'll have input for those things, but as far as jobs go, I'm gonna be the one in control of those. I will be open to moving job start times, but no, maintenance plans is a complete showstopper for me.
I mean, that's curious. I mean, I've always when management when I didn't work at the place I don't really work at. But when management forced something technical upon us, I always, probably in a closed door, I wouldn't do it in front of everyone, but ask why. Well, what's the business reason why we need to use this particular feature or function? And most of the times they had a good business reason. Well, we want to do this, and down the line, this is the feature where we're trying to go. And I'm like, okay, we'll work it out. But sometimes it's like, well, no, I thought that this plan thing is what everybody else used, and it was a best practice. And it's like, no, you're misinformed. So a lot of those technical things, the managers at some point were technical, and maybe 4 or 5 years have gone by, and that's no longer the case. And so we have to re-educate them. And it's like, yeah, that's not really current thinking. That's kind of a bad idea nowadays. It just, in what I'm using in the cloud, there's a lot of things that when we weren't in the cloud were good ideas that are absolutely horrible ideas in the cloud, and when we're talking about stateless processing and things like that. So, I mean, I feel you, I know where you're at, but you ask those questions first. Don't don't snap back or anything. Just ask for the business justifications for we're using these things, and if they are sound and valid, then you have to run with it. But if you have other suggestions on how to accomplish that without doing something that's not quite kosher technically, then go ahead and offer those up.
All right. I just realized my camera is fairly blurry today. Oh well. I tried to fix it, but GoToWebinar is not being nice to me today. All right, Chris asks, every time we fail over from one availability group to another, we need to recreate the database master key in the databases with encrypted data. Are there any ways to avoid having to do this each failover, possibly sharing a service master key? Chris, I have a lot of experience with availability groups, but I have never touched an availability group that also has encryption in place. So this is not my area of expertise. So I don't have that answer. I would suggest you ask that question on Stack Exchange. It is a really good question, and I bet you someone has that answer, and probably you'd get an answer very fast. Like I'm probably within a few minutes. Tashal has a great question. I have a job to recompile store procs if their value of max elapsed time is greater than 0.08 milliseconds, which I think is wow. Okay. Initially, it was for one store procedure, and the job has one step, but now it becomes multiple procs and multiple job steps. How can I make this dynamic so that I don't need to add job step every time a proc becomes bad? Tashal, you need to take a step back. We would create these jobs back in SQL Server 2005 and older days, where we didn't have a lot of tools available to us to troubleshoot parameter sniffing issues. Adding a recompiled job for store procedures, once they surpass a certain elapsed time, I mean, sure, maybe do that, but you need to start troubleshooting why you're encountering parameter sniffing and look towards the newer features of SQL Server. Starting with SQL Server 2008, we've got option recompile available, so you can do it at the query level and not at the store proc level. I mean, obviously you're doing SP recompile. But option recompile, we also have option optimize for, so optimizing for a specific input parameter. I like that one a lot, and I've done that both hard-coded as well as in a plan guide. If you're on SQL Server 2016 or newer, we've got the fancy query store feature, and that would be an excellent feature for you to use. It's got a nice interface where you can see execution plans degrade, the performance degrade of a query, and you can tell it, I want to use this other plan. So I would be taking a step back and not doing the approach that you're doing. This is how what you're doing is what we did a while ago. Start looking into why the parameter sniffing issues are happening and what other workarounds should be put in place. Don't default to recompiling it. All right, Pablo asks, what should I monitor when try to blame network if replication with always on gets slow? So replication,
I guess, I don't know. Oh.
Replication, so I don't know that I've ever really blamed the networking team if the replication is getting slow. What I would be looking at is the replication monitor and seeing, did we have a large transaction run? Look at the publisher to distributor history, and if you see a large amount of rows having to be, or records having to be scanned in the transaction log, you probably had something large run. Look at the distributor to subscriber, the history there, and the, what is it called, the unpublished commands or whatever it is. It's been a while since I've looked at replication. Look there. You probably had a large transaction run, and a lot of data now needs to move from the publisher to the distributor and the distributor to subscriber. And yes, it does go across the network, but I don't think I'm blaming the network for that issue. Large transactions are going to cause latency for replication. I think I skipped a replication question above. Well, I'll find it in a little bit. Thomas asks, I am running SQL, he spells SQL out, S-E-Q-U-E-L, which is funny. So SQL server 2014 enterprise. I have max server set for 89 gigabytes of RAM, and I always have 6 gigabytes available. Is this setting okay? Do I need to turn it down a little for the OS to run? Okay, well, so you told us you have max server memory set for 89 gigabytes of RAM, but we don't know how much RAM your actual server has. So our really quick rule of thumb is to give 4 gigabytes or 10% of RAM back to the OS and other processes. That's just a general quick rule. Jonathan Cahias has a a different type of calculation that you can do. So depending upon how much RAM you have, you end up needing to give the OS and other processes a lot more RAM. I did write a DBA Tools PowerShell function that can do this work for you. So he follows up, says he has 96 gigabytes of RAM. So 96 minus 9, 86. I mean, you're right around where we would recommend. And the fact that you have 6 gigabytes always available, you're probably okay. And maybe you could give more to SQL Server. Are you having a memory issue? I think your setting is just fine where it is. All right. Darshan asks, would you know how to forecast database growth over the period of time, and how can we estimate capacity issue? That's something that DBA struggle with. You know, how much storage are we going to need in 2 years? What's the growth going to be? And as a DBA, I don't answer that question. I go back to the business, and they have to tell me what their forecasts are for application features. Are we going to be onboarding a lot more customers going forward? I can track it, and so I can see. I can check out the growth of it. I can chart it out, but that doesn't mean that a new feature is going to come out that's going to be using a lot more data. You know, maybe a year from now. Are we just, you know, our sales going to be great, and we're going to have more products, more customers in the system, things like that. So I can track it, and I can forecast current growth rate, but that doesn't really tell me the growth rate of the business. All right, Christopher asks, wait, your SQL servers have more than 4 gigabytes of RAM. You'd be surprised what some of our clients, how smaller servers are, and they're coming to us for help. We're like, and a lot of times our replies are, even my laptop or desktop has more RAM than your little bitty server. What are you guys doing?
my favorite is my phone.
Yes. Yeah. And I just got the new iPhone XS. It's way better than my old iPhone 7, which wasn't even that old. It's not even a year old. And I just had to upgrade.
And I have the iPhone 10, and it's the 10s, by the way, not the XS. And I feel like I'm so old.
Some people will say 10, some people will say X, and so I never know which one to go by.
Yeah, I mean, I you know, this is less than a year old, and already I'm feeling like, man, I should need a new phone. Jeez, it's so bad.
Yeah. All right, Thomas asks, is there ever a reason to use minimum memory settings? Minimum memories. Oh, so at one of my companies, we would set the min server memory to half the amount of max server memory, but this was on failover clusters where we had multiple instances, and that's not really, you know, we don't recommend instance stacking. So if you have 2 instances, we would normally recommend 3 nodes in a cluster. But we would set that just in case a failover occurred, and we wanted to make sure that an instance got a minimum amount of RAM if it ever had to share. So you could do that to make sure that even on a non-failover cluster, standalone, but I would only do this if I had multiple instances, and these days I wouldn't have multiple instances.
You know, we had a failover incident in Constant Care on Monday afternoon. I don't know if you saw that. So we are running in Aurora on AWS, and so we have a cluster. And when we start pegging the database, sometimes things kind of get log jammed a little bit occasionally. And we had a failover, and so we had files fail, and all our data is encrypted, and it just automatically failed over. And I just came home that night, reset everything to run, and everything reprocessed. So, I mean, those are the weird things about, I guess, serverless in the cloud, that, you know, when you have these failover instances, you know, these things that happen, you just always have to figure out how to retry it, right? So you know, the weird cloud things is, I mean, most of the times when I've used to create stuff, it's like retry. Oh, we never want to retry something. But no, now everything has to be retried in the cloud now. Just, you know, you hit that button, and then all of a sudden everything that failed gets pushed back up. Failures.
Tammy has a question. I found the replication that I accidentally skipped. The MS repo commands table is 60 plus million records. Everything I see says to set immediate sync to 0. Is that right? Our monitoring query started timing out recently due to large number of records. And when I originally scanned this question, I got excited because I thought it was the distribution cleanup job table that it's pointing to. And I don't think that this is it. Now that I've read the question out loud, I don't remember. It's been too long since I've been not been a consultant, and I don't touch replication very often anymore. My client this week has replication, but I take a quick screenshot and then close. Not today. All right, there we go. Jason wanted to know what the name of the memory, the max server memory function that I created over at DBA Tools. I don't remember it. And dbatools.io is the website, something like that. I don't. In Google, SQL Server DBA Tools. That'll bring you to the main, to the website for the DBA Tools. And there's probably hundreds of functions out there. Search for the one that says, you search for all the ones that say memory. It probably is like set max server memory, something, or I just don't remember. I tried searching for it while Richie was talking about the failovers, but unfortunately it's not on this specific machine that I worked on. It's on my laptop.
So you're actually trying to get something done while I was talking about my failures.
I was
At least
listening.
something good came out of it.
I was just scrolling through Windows Explorer real quick. Nika asked, does Blitz Index work at the database level or per index? And how long should I plan for it to run if I know there are significant issues with indexes and up to a total of 300 gigabytes in index space on the database? So it's not the size of the indexes that's going to be the problem for Blitz Index, it's the number of indexes. Normally Blitz Index doesn't take very long to run on most people's systems, but if you have thousands of indexes, it's going to take a long time. I've recently had a client that Blitz Index would time out through our little collector tool that we use. And even when I ran it, it was taking forever. And I forget how many indexes they had, but it was in the thousands, and it took like 45 minutes to run. That is not normal. I mean, it should take, a minute, 2 minutes. It just depends on the number of indexes. And it doesn't really matter about this significant issues either. It's the number that the number of them that matters. Just let it run in Management Studio, though. By default, there isn't a timeout value there. Darshan asked, which tool can I use to create database growth forecast reports? I actually do have a .NET CLR object out there from many, many years ago. This is probably 10 years ago. You could use it, and you store the data into a table, and then point an Excel at it. I don't remember what that's called. It's on my very, very old blog, weblogs.sqlteam.com/TerraD, D as in my maiden name initial. It's out there. I think it's called database growth, and it actually was featured in SQL Server Magazine a few years ago. But I don't think I would use that anymore. I don't know what I would use. I just, it's not something that I'm looking at these days.
Blitz something, right? I don't know, maybe.
Oh yeah, Blitz first can collect it. It collects it does collect the file stat information, so you could utilize that. So create if you go to the if you download our first responder kit, there is the Power BI dashboard can read the Blitz tables, and so I think there's a script to set up the jobs to run Blitz first every 15 minutes, and one of the things it can collect is file stat information. So you would have to take a look, write a query to call those tables. I'm not sure if the Power BI dashboard would show you the growth chart, but at least you have the table to collect that data, or the tool to collect it. All right, Celso asks, Kelso probably, we have a SQL 2016 availability group set up with local as well as WAN secondaries. We have about 8 availability groups with about 40 total databases on them. He got the excess today. Anyway, it's a 4-core server with 72 gigabytes of RAM. I ran some queries to see how many of my 512 workers were used, and I noticed that on the secondaries, the number of committed workers is much higher than on the primary. What gives? I haven't looked at the worker threads on a secondary to see what the difference is. There's probably availability group worker threads in play. There is an article out there, and I don't have the link handy, but it's probably on MSDN, where it'll show you how many worker threads an availability group can use. And 4 cores may not be enough for your setup if you have this many databases. The more databases you have, the more worker threads are going to be needed just for availability groups. And if you ever have a blocking chain occur, you will much quicker run into thread pool weights than someone who is not running an availability group with lots of databases. You have to be very careful with the number of databases for a low core server when using availability groups. 4 cores is not a lot of cores these days. We'll do one more question.
Ooh, look at you, the overachiever.
Yeah. Alex asks, I set read committed snapshot on, but still having problem with readers. He's blocking writers. So selects versus an update, he says. According to SP who is active, am I missing something? Alex, when you have, so read committed snapshot is RCSI, read committed snapshot isolation level. It will help out with readers versus writers as far as blocking and deadlocks go, but there are times where RCSI does not get mapped. So your connections, your transactions have to be read committed. That's why it's called RCSI. So the RC is read committed. You have to be using read committed for RCSI to get mapped to it. If your transaction is read uncommitted, which, such as no lock-ins, that doesn't get mapped to it. Also, there are times where we need to escalate above RCSI behavior to prevent, to make sure a blocking occurs. So we're protecting data and not allowing anybody to read or write for the specific your row or page or whatever it is. So we may go to serializable isolation level for specific business cases. So you'd have to look into what's going on with those. If these were deadlocks, you could use our SB Blitz lock, which will give you isolation level information, and it would show you. But start tracking. Oh, with SB who is active, add the @get_additional_info input parameter to your SB who's active execution. So set that equal to 1, and then there'll be an XML column, additional info, I believe it's called. Click on that, and it'll show you the isolation level of those. And then take a look at the actual queries. Are they escalating to serializable isolation level? For instance, UPD lock, hold lock is serializable, but you can also say set isolation level to serializable. So there's things that do not get mapped to RCSI, and read uncommitted and serializable do not. And somebody found the name of the PowerShell object. It is test-DBA max memory and set-DBA max memory. So there you go. Thank you, Jason and Tashal, who found those. All right, that's the end of office hours. We will see you guys next week. Bye.